Chairs No Waiting, episode number 593, Earlie and Lorraine. Two Chairs No Waiting is brought to you each week by the folks over at weaversdepartmentstore.com. Drop by over at Weavers and pick up some of the great Mayberry items they have for sale there. They have country bacon, and right now they're still running a special. If you buy 2 packages of bacon, you'll save $4 on them. So go and get you some bacon. Who doesn't love bacon? My goodness. It's Mayberry's finest bacon. It's gourmet bacon, by the way. And while you're doing that, you might as well get Aunt Bee's cookbook, the hardcover edition, so you'll know how to cook that bacon. Head over to weaversdepartmentstore.com and check it out. Two Chairs No Waiting is also brought to you by donations from listeners like you, and the executive producer of episode number 593 are the attendees of the Mayberry Meetup in 2020, because they collected up money and donated it to the podcast. So thank you for supporting the show, and thank you for being here with me. I'm Alan Newsom, the host of Two Chairs No Waiting. Huge Mayberry fan. Hopefully you already know that. I've got 11 years of podcasts that you can go back and listen to and realize just how much I can evidently talk about the Andy Griffith Show weekly. I've been doing it for a long time. So recently, I received a letter that the reason the podcast is named Earlie and Lorraine is I received a letter from a friend and listener of the podcast or viewer of the podcast that wrote me this great letter. Now she's from the Blood Brothers chapter of the Andy Griffith Show Rerun Watchers Club in Missouri, or no, is it Missouri? Montana. Yeah, Macon. It's a long way from here. So it's a long way from Mayberry. But Johnna, I always say her Joanna. Johnna is she is a blood brother, and her fellow blood brothers make the long trek to North Carolina almost yearly. But I got this great letter from her where she was talking about it. So this is going to be an episode about some feedback, and this is just one piece of the amazing feedback that we got. So let's go ahead and get this started. This was it was referencing the episode number 589 of Two Chairs No Waiting that we did recently. It was called, I Know You Won't Let Me Down. And Johnna says this. She says, Alan, thank you for the wonderful podcast, episode number 589. I always learn something from Randy Turner, our roving reporter. And your story about taking Jan to Nashville to the Mayberry reunion was so funny. You know, I think your wife is a keeper for not letting you down. And I have to agree 100% with that statement. So she goes on to say, my mom, Lois, and I were also at the reunion in 2001 on our way to North Carolina. Wow. So it's always amazing to me that people I knew were at these events and I didn't see them. It was fantastic, but we were so overwhelmed, she says. She says, I remember wanting to get Don Knotts' autograph, and his line was naturally a mile long. So instead, we got autographs and pictures taken with Betty Lynn, Howard Morris, Maggie Mancuso. It was an amazing time spent at the Opryland Hotel. Our favorite was when Don Knotts recreated the choir scene. We also attended the Grand Ole Opry on Saturday night, and she attached a photo that we have of all the Andy Griffith Show folks on stage with David Browning and Porter Wagner. They're right there on stage of the Grand Ole Opry. It was an amazing night. All these Mayberry folks up on the stage. Our seats weren't quite this close as they show in her picture, but I was able to make my way down the aisle and snap a very quick shot. It was the most amazing weekend and a great time in our lives. I also want to share with you about the first of 3 summers Mom and I traveled to Mount Airy. The first summer followed that Nashville Andy Griffith Show reunion. It was in June of 2001, and we spent 3 days in Mount Airy just enjoying the lovely atmosphere of the town. We were determined to do everything, so we stayed at Andy's home place, bed and breakfast. That was an incredible experience in itself. To think we were where Andy actually had been. We, of course, did what most folks do and visited downtown, shopped, and took a squad car ride, and loved visiting with the friendly folks. And when we were in snappy lunch, we had a pork chop sandwich that Mr. Charles Dow cooked for us himself. Then he graciously posed for a photo with us. We spent a lot of time in the Chamber of Commerce, at least I think that's what it was called, where Emmett's Forrest had his collection of Andy Griffith memorabilia at the time. That was probably the Gilmore Smith house. I believe it was in the Blue House probably at that time up there at the north end of Main Street. Let's go on. She goes on to say, this was several years before the Andy Griffith Museum opened on the site where it is today. We met Emmett, and he was so kind to share Andy's stories with us about his childhood years and how they kept up as close friends as adults in spite of Andy's fame. One afternoon, we drove over to Pilot Mountain. That's about 12 or 13 miles maybe from Mount Airy, something like that. And we enjoyed it very much. We drove into town and we stopped by Gilley's Automotive and Supply Company. And lo and behold, who was working at the time but Lorraine and Earlie Gilley themselves. As stated, they started visiting with us like they had known us forever. Lorraine was Andy's first cousin, and she told us a few stories about him, but she said he was a very private person. However, they had been to visit him and his wife several times at a house in Manteo. I shared with her that I just couldn't imagine having a conversation with him. And she said it was really just like sitting down with Andy Taylor and having a good old gab session. Earlie was very kind as well. And Lorraine was the talker of the two. And she and Mom hit it off immediately about quilting. So they were talking about quilting and gardening. The afternoon we spent with them has been one of the most cherished memories related to the Andy Griffith Show. 1 month after our visit, Lorraine sent me a card with a wonderful note inside that she attached to this thing. So there's a picture. I have a picture of this. She said, and at the bottom it says, the note she had written says, "Have a good year." And that referred to my upcoming school year when I taught 5th grade. Lorraine shared that it was quite a surprise when they were watching the Andy Griffith Show and their names were mentioned on the episode. It was Andy's way of saying hey to them back home. So thank you for allowing me to reminisce about my wonderful vacations from years past. And as always, thank you for all the work you do in keeping us all connected to Mayberry during these crazy times. And so here's you and yours, Johnna Clark, your blood brother from Missouri. I did have it right, Missouri. So it was great. They had a great meeting. Earlie Gilley, you remember they talked about Earlie Gilley's gas station. That was talked about. And Lorraine was mentioned on there a few times. And so was Earlie. So that was great. So she sent a letter, and I wanted to go ahead and read the letter to you. They got a really nice picture that they sent with it of Andy and Cindy Griffith standing beside Lorraine and Earlie Gilley. And so this letter to Johnna from Lorraine said, "Johnna, we just met this summer, but I enjoyed talking with you and your mother so much. Lois and I share a great love in common, quilting. I'm sending you both a snapshot so you can't forget your visit to Mount Pilot. I do hope you can come sometime at Mayberry Days. It's one more event with lots of visitors from out of state. I'll send you both a paper on it in September. We just plan to walk there some, and our grandson plays golf, and there's a dinner later that evening. Well, have a good year, Lorraine." Isn't that really cool? So this is Andy's cousin, Lorraine, and she was mentioned a few times on the Andy Griffith Show. And Johnna got this great letter from her and a picture that of them visiting with Andy and his wife over in Manteo. So Johnna, thank you so much for sending that in. She had sent it earlier this month, or last month, I guess, July of 2020. And I'm just now getting around to it because I really wanted to talk about this a lot because we got to Kenneth Junkin. He was really good friends with Earlie and Earlie Jr. and Earlie the Third, all of them, the grandson. And they play golf with Kenneth a good bit. So they were close friends. So these were are some really nice folks, the Gillies. So it's nice to see that they spread the Mayberry spirit in what all they did as well. So thank you again for sending that. I've got a few more little pieces of feedback. This one is from Richard, and he says, thanks and a Gunsmoke surprise. He says, Alan, please let me be the first to thank you for the imayberry.com website, your podcast, as well as the joy that you and all the contributing fans of the Andy Griffith Show bring to me. I'm a big fan not only of the show, but also of the actors who have made appearances therein. I enjoy Hogan's Heroes as well, and sometimes it's like watching a crossover show. I ran across an episode of Gunsmoke that aired on January the 14th, 1967. That was in season 12. It was episode 17. It was called Mad Dog. It was like watching an Andy Griffith Show reunion. I easily counted 4 Andy Griffith Show characters, including Dud, which is Hocal, Goober, George Lindsay, the postal clerk, who's Billy Ray or Talbot, which is Dub Taylor, was the actor, and Mr. Darlin, Denver Pyle. And I thought you might find this interesting, especially given the dates that it aired, since it was concurrent with the production and airing of the Andy Griffith Show. Thanks again for your efforts and talents, Richard. So, Richard, thank you for sending that in. I have seen that episode, and plus other episodes. It's so often you can see Andy Griffith Show people on Gunsmoke. They appear on there regularly, and of course, Perry Mason is another one I see him on a lot. But I will be watching for that episode, and it is interesting that it occurred in 1967 while the Andy Griffith Show was still being filmed. So you had Goober and Denver, George and Denver. They were both on there, and Hoke, and of course Dub Taylor. That's really neat. So thank you, Richard. Thank you for writing that in to us. Next up, this is from Morgan Larson, and it's a reference to the Mayberry Meetup report episode that we did just a few weeks ago, episode number 591. They say, Alan, I just wanted to thank you for the information about the Mayberry Meetup. I love every 2 chairs, no waiting, but I really like the stories about festivals and events. Living in Utah makes it very difficult to attend anything, but it's still fun to hear about it. 2 questions. So let's see if I can answer them. Could you please talk to Mr. Weaver and convince him to make some face masks with the likenesses of Barney, Andy, and Otis and others on the mask? And who were the victims and killer in the Mayberry murder mystery? So I can answer the first one quickly. Mr. Weaver doesn't actually make the products. You have to have a license to be able to make Andy Griffith Show items. So anything with a likeness or anything like that of a character, it breaks copyright laws if you make it without a license. Now you can get away with making one or something like that, if you wanted one for yourself, but you can't get away with doing any kind of mass production of them because you'll get in trouble. Because one could be kind of art maybe, but you make 1,000 of them or 100 of them, and the owners of the copyright start coming after you. So Weavers has been looking to see if somebody with a license was making masks, and so far, no luck. Haven't been able to do it. And who were the victims and killer in the Mayberry murder mystery? I honestly don't know. Indiana Steve in our chat room is the one who actually did the murder mystery, and I don't think I even grabbed a copy of it because at the time I couldn't play because I was too busy doing everything else. So I didn't get to play in the murder mystery. So that's a good question. Maybe we can get Steve to submit that and we can play it online somehow. I don't know. I don't know if we can do that or not. All right. So anyway, sorry, we don't know. Okay. They got more in here. It says, I'm thinking out loud now. Please ask Mr. Weaver to make a Monopoly edition of Clue. Again, same answer. Can't make things they have to be in copyright. So sorry, Morgan. I'd love to do that. They say, we really love the website, the calendars, and the podcast. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much. And thank you for the suggestions. We just can't do it. Can't make there was a Mayberry-opoly game, I think, at one time. What? Rafe Hollister was the killer. Rafe Hollister killed him? I'm getting a report in just now that Rafe Hollister was the murderer. Oh my goodness. I am so disappointed in Rafe. Oh my goodness. The report just came in. So there you go. I got that answer for you, at least, Morgan. So now you know. I don't know what else happened though, but oh man, we could start some rumors, couldn't we? Next thing we know, he just got a finger cut is all that happened. I don't know. So let's go on. Thank you again for writing in. We appreciate it. And now this one's from Iowa. This is from Tim. He says, huge fan of your podcast and the Andy Griffith Show. Been watching the Andy Griffith Show since I was a teenager. The DVDs are the best way to be able to watch the show since they are complete. They are remastered episodes as they were meant to be viewed. And this is probably related to the fact that Netflix recently took the Andy Griffith Show off of its streaming service here in 2020. So just so you know that. He goes on to say, I also have watched a few YouTube videos about the actual lot in Culver City, California, where they shot the outside scenes, the 40 acres lot, including the beginning scene of the Andy Griffith Show, which was up at the Franklin Canyon. What they all look like then versus now is on those videos that he's talking about that are on YouTube. I guess everything was demolished in around 1975. That's sad, but that's progress. Cool stuff indeed. God bless, Tim. So thank you, Tim. Thank you. Those are really neat videos. If you go and look around on YouTube, you can probably find them. They're out there. Now we've got from Phil Bernard. Phil wrote in. He's Leonard Blush. He says, this is about Aunt B. He says, I came across an item of interest that may be worthy of podcast discussion. Eric Lowry posted a photo of Francis Bavier's gravestone recently. Eric is our mayor, the tribute artist for the mayor. And Jeff Branch also shared it. He's Howard Sprague, tribute artist. And then Ronnie Felker, Barney Fife tribute artist, made mention of the fact that Aunt B was actually cremated and not buried there at the cemetery. I'd never heard this before. So Mary, his wife, Phil's wife, then searched and found her death certificate online. And sure enough, she was cremated in Greensboro. Now I wonder what became of her ashes. And I suppose that that is what's at the cemetery in Siler City. Maybe is just her gravestone, but it could be her ashes too. They could have buried her ashes there as well. Although Mary has, as I mentioned, is quite possible her ashes are buried there. Yeah, at the cemetery. Right. So they could be. So thanks, Phil. I didn't know that Aunt B or Frances had been cremated either. I've known about that gravestone, and people leave pickle jars and all kinds of stuff all around all the time. So thanks for writing and giving us that information. That's good. Now our final report is not a full report. Zach Cooley, he is the author of a column called Strictly Observing that's in the Withville Enterprise. And you can look that up. And he's going to have an article in it on Wednesday, the 5th of August, 2020, talking about the Mayberry meetup. So I have a very abbreviated version I'm going to tell you about. But if you want to see the full article, you can go and search for Strictly Observing and Zach Cooley, Z-A-C-H, Cooley, and try to find it. I bet you'll be able to later. But here's what he had to say about the Mayberry meetup. On July 18th, Emma, Bella, and I and had perhaps the best night of our entire year. I've been coming to Mayberry festivals in Mount Airy, North Carolina for 10 years, and ever since my wife and I spent our honeymoon there during the 50th anniversary celebration of the Andy Griffith Show. The thing we enjoyed most on that trip was watching episodes on the big screen of the Earl Theater. Alan Newsom, a 27-year-old veteran tribute artist, man, that makes me sound old, for Mayberry's Floyd the Barber, was holding the 8th annual meetup for Mayberry, and tribute artists and hardcore fans and all kinds of folks showed up. In the 10 years of never missing Mayberry days, I had never heard about this. We gathered at the gazebo of the Mayberry Motor Inn for door prizes, a Mayberry murder mystery game, Mayberry trivia, and a terrific amateur tribute artist contest. It was a really good contest, by the way. It was good. It resulted in a 3-way tie between the famous female convicted convicts trio and the clanging old lady thief, Mrs. The old ladies ought never clang, and Countess Vantalecki. Others included Thelma Lou's attractive skeet shooting cousin, Karen Moore, and 2 representatives of troublemaking mountain man, Regis. There was 2 of them. A husband and wife team also portrayed the carnival act, The Sultan's Favorite, which Andy shut down for being too risque. It's great. You guys had a great time. To us, the less crowded gathering like this was far easier around which to navigate than the hustle of Mayberry Days itself. Best of all, we got to watch 3 episodes of the Andy Griffith Show on a big screen, along with the episode of the Danny Thomas Show that served, I should say, as the pilot episode of the Andy Griffith Show. I'm so glad that one of the 3 episodes shown was his personal favorite, Zach's personal, Convicts at Large. The other 2 being Man in a Hurry and One Punch Opie. I cannot thank Alan and the gang enough for this unforgettable evening, which meant more to us than anyone will ever know. As someone who so eloquently on Facebook said, there's no friend quite like a Mayberry friend. That's from Zach. So now that's an abbreviated version. He has a much longer version of this. It'll be in the newspaper and the Withful Enterprise. So you should be able to look that up in the coming days, and it'll be published. So you'll be able to check it out. So thank you, Zach, and good luck with your article. He's been writing articles for a long time for them. So it's good to have him. All right. Now I have one voicemail that I wanted to play for you. And this is about some food in Mayberry. I don't have the answer, but maybe you guys can help me. So here, Frank is going to take it away. So take it away, Frank.
Hello, Alan. This is Frank Ingram in West Palm Beach. We had quite a time together back in 2009. But I have a question. I've never heard this addressed. There's a lot of eating on the Andy Griffith Show. There's a lot of food served at the table in the house, in the jail, at the courthouse in the Christmas episode. There's just a lot of food eaten. I'm just curious. Never heard about it. Does anybody have any idea where the food came from? Did they really eat it? I guess somebody later did, but there's a lot of food in the Andy Griffith Show. Does anybody know anything about that? I'm just curious. Something I've never heard talked about. Thank you, Alan. God bless you. Goodbye.
Hey, thank you, Frank. Yeah, we did an event down in Florida with him a long time ago, like he said. So I don't know much about the food, and so I'd like to hear if people do know this, but I don't. The only things I do know are like the pickles that Opie was eating, Ron Howard was eating. Those were they weren't really dill pickles. Somehow, and I'm not quite sure how, they were chocolate, or they had chocolate. Surely not on them. I don't know. Surely it wasn't a cucumber with chocolate on it. I just can't imagine that would taste good. But Ron Howard doesn't like dill pickles. So then he was having to eat them. And so I know that those were somehow not really dill pickles. And the story had always been there was chocolate on there. I can't confirm or deny that, but that's what I have always heard. And so other than that, I don't know who got to eat all the fried chicken, because there was an awful lot of fried chicken on the Andy Griffith Show. So I don't know if it was if it was really edible. I have seen pictures of the makeup man, I do believe it was Lee Greenway. Is that right, Lee? He cooking cookies. And so they obviously had food on the set, because he had cookies and had a pan full of cookies that he had just taken out of the oven in that photograph. So it looks like he was cooking cookies. So I don't know how much they actually ate, but you're right. I'd never really thought about that, of them having a lot of food on the Andy Griffith Show, but there you go. So thank you, Frank. Thank you to everybody that took time to write and call and whatever you did to contact and visit with me. It's always great to hear from you guys. So now we get to hear from our roving reporter, Randy Turner, for this week in Mayberry History.
Welcome to This Week in Mayberry History, a report by special correspondent Randy Turner of the Gomer and Cooper Pyle Comic Book Literary Guild of the Mayberry Historical Society.
I thought I would try something different this week. I'm going to explain how frustrating research can be when dealing with character actors not seen as broadly as many, such as William Keene, who played Reverend Tucker in The Andy Griffith Show. Let's start with the information that is not confusing. William was born on August 4th, 1915 in Franklin, Pennsylvania. And that's about it. Information about his personal life is just not readily accessible. His Wikipedia page is quite short, makes no mention of any work in old-time radio, but there is a William Keene who appears in radio databases who had at least 59 appearances. Another less comprehensive old-time radio site lists him, but the information they provide is literally copied and pasted from his Wikipedia entry. This latter site lists his first appearance as being in 1951, but the more comprehensive site lists more than 24 earlier appearances, with the first being on January the 25th, 1947, in the Columbia Workshop. To make matters worse, the voluminous book, The Encyclopedia of Old-Time Radio, lists him both as William Keene and Bill Keene, while clearly referring to the same person. So assuming this is the same William Keene, he appeared in various roles in series such as The Big Story, Secret Missions, and Dimension X, before appearing in The Transatlantic Push, an episode of the series The Silent Man, the first series that appears in both lists. His last role in the Golden Age was a 1957 appearance in X-1. In the midst of his work in old-time radio, William may have appeared on Broadway in an evening of one acts where he played a role in each of two plays, What Do You Call It? And The Devil Is a Good Man. The two plays were performed one after the other in the same evening, opening on March the 19th, 1940, and the plays ran for just a little over a month, closing on April the 24th after 38 performances. But is this the same William Keene? It's hard to know. No playbills are available to check the performer's biography, and there's also a William L. Keene listed as a Broadway performer, though his role occurred so early that he's not likely our William Keene. And of course, no references made in his Wikipedia page other than a link to our Broadway site in the footnotes. According to the not always reliable Internet Movie Database, William made his television debut in a 1950 episode of The Big Story, a dramatic series little remembered today, but which ran for 10 years. Throughout the 1950s, William appeared only on television in series such as The Secret Files of Captain Video, Lux Video Theater, Mike Hammer, and Sky King. He had a small role in the classic 1958 Alfred Hitchcock Presents episode Lamb to the Slaughter, written by Roald Dahl, in which a woman did more injury to her husband with a leg of lamb than Otis inadvertently did to his mother-in-law. While he had small, usually uncredited roles in a handful of movies over his career, William acted primarily in television. He first appeared in The Andy Griffith Show halfway through the third season in the classic Man in a Hurry, playing Reverend Hobart M. Tucker. for the first time on January the 14th, 1963. He was still Reverend Tucker later that same year in the Sermon for Today, and the following year in Barney's uniform. But in the 5th season episode, Opie's newspaper, the dry as dust preacher was called Reverend Martin, a name he kept in the color episode, The Church Organ, that fall. He appeared as the Taylor's minister one last time in 1968 in The Church Benefactors. Just like Bertha Edwards, Clara Edwards, Howie Pruitt, who was Howie Williams in one episode, Emma Brand, who became Emma Watson, and others, Williams' minister character always appeared to be the same character, despite the name change. He continued to play the Mayberry minister in half a dozen episodes of Mayberry RFD, beginning when he officiated the marriage of Andy Taylor and Helen Crump, and ending when he baptized their new baby. During the 1960s, while he was occasionally appearing in Mayberry, William also appeared in series such as The Twilight Zone, The Joey Bishop Show, Lassie, The Addams Family, Perry Mason, and Green Acres. William appeared less than 5 times during the 70s, and then retired after a 1981 guest shot in Little House on the Prairie. William passed away in 1992. And one final point of confusion, many sources state that William was awarded a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, but that star was actually given to Bill Keene, a radio personality well known in Los Angeles for his weather and traffic reports filled with puns. Well, that's it for this week. As always, thanks for listening, and remember to take care of yourself, care for one another, and take Andy's advice and act like somebody.
Wow, thank you, Randy. Always, he comes up with stuff that you just don't know, and he works so hard. If you want to make sure you don't miss on all the great stuff that Randy does around the Mayberry stuff, send him an email at turnersgrade@gmail.com, turnersgrade@gmail.com, and he'll make sure you don't miss out on any of this. He works really hard trying to come up with these things, and I have to say that William Keene was difficult to even find photos of. So the video version of the podcast always has photos that go along with Randy's reports. So, I'm always looking. I go out and find all the pictures and stuff. There was not very many pictures of him, which was amazing to me because he had been on a lot of things and you just couldn't find him. So there was not too many pictures. So not only did Randy have a hard time finding information about him, I had a hard time finding pictures. Now, we did have some people in our chat room that were chiming in about what happened to all the food. I came up with, I thought Dickie ate all the chicken. That was one thing. Dickie ate the chicken. He's a buzzard. He might have a buzzard there. And somebody said, and I can't remember who, I'm sorry, but they said Andy ate 3 helpings of spaghetti. We know that. He's going to have his 3rd dinner. So we got that as well. So we know some of the food was being eaten right there on the set. I don't know. I wonder how many times they had to eat stuff too, because they shoot things over and over sometimes, more than once. So I can't imagine that they wouldn't end up having to eat, over and over the same thing. And it would probably be whatever you don't like. That's what you're having to eat, not ice cream or something. They're giving you something that tastes terrible. So anyway, all right, guys, I think that is it. I've kept you a little longer than I normally do, but hopefully you all enjoyed the reports that we had. I just want to thank Johnna. I want to thank everybody that wrote in with these great reports. Great job. And thank Randy as well. Friends, we're going to be probably taking a break in the month of September of new actual podcast episodes because I'll be off filming the Mayberry Man movie. I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be big. Mayberry Man. Woo! But even if we're not doing podcast episodes, be watching for special reports coming through the same channels to give you information about things that are going on around the movie or just things going on as we're filming it. Because I'm going to be traveling with Otis. So it'll be Floyd and Otis talking. We'll probably have some fun. So we'll have fun in September, even if we can't put out podcasts. And looking forward to it. So everybody have a great week, and we'll see you next time here on Two Chairs.